Today, I would like to welcome Jay Egg, founder and CEO of EggGeo. EggGeo is a global leader in geothermal exchange consulting for geothermal energy districts, data centers, institutions, and multifamily complexes for clients ranging from developers and ESG funds to governments and other entities. EggGeo's mission is to ensure their clients optimize their capabilities to generate effective heating and cooling in buildings for transitioning to clean and sustainable energy. Jay is a certified geothermal designer, mechanical professional, co-recipient of the 2020 Constellation Prize for Policy Change, and a passionate thermal energy advocate who started his career in nuclear power with the U.S. Navy. Jay, welcome to Deep Power CEO Chats today.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I appreciate your time. So I have to ask, how did your beginning of your career working with nuclear power at the Navy really lead you to where you are today at EggGeo?
You know, when you go into something like nuclear power, it really is about you have a heat source and you need to do something with it. So that's called heat transfer and fluid flow. And so we really, when I got out of the Navy, one of the first things I did, I got out of the Navy in Orlando, where I was at the nuclear power school teaching. And I immediately, and when I bought my first house, I saw this outside air conditioner condenser, and I saw it struggling against the 95-degree outdoor temperature while my irrigation pump was pumping 72-degree water around on my lawn. And so I said, this is not a hard solution. I want to use that water as a heat sink for my air conditioner. It also worked as a heat source. So I had a heat pump in the wintertime, even though it doesn't get that cold in Florida, maybe 30, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, I was able to use the same heat pump to produce heat. Because why? It's 72 degrees year round. So I immediately started a company, EggGeo, after I got out of the Navy, and it developed over the next 20 years. We grew, we did a lot of projects in Central Florida. And then we had the chance under the Obama administration with the stimulus package from 2009. We were offered the opportunity by McGraw-Hill, New York. They commissioned us to write a couple of textbooks. That literally, in my opinion, is the reason why we're not just a Florida entity now, rather we're a worldwide entity. Because when you have the chance to publish, you tend to get folks coming at you from all around the world. And some of those first folks were in New York State, and that really caused us to stretch and learn and grow and get our global reach out, which is where it is today.
I love that response and the natural progression of you see a problem at your home, your air conditioner. I mean, it's amazing that one problem kind of catapults you into this entire industry. And I think it's important. Most people that I speak with in the geothermal industry, or excuse me, outside of the geothermal industry, when I talk about geothermal, that's what they're most familiar with is heating and cooling buildings, right? You've got Boise, where a lot of the city of Boise is heated that way. And although Deep Power is focused on drilling technology to reach, that super hot rock, which is around that 400 degrees Celsius, 70% of the industry right now is using geothermal to heat and cool homes. So we understand how massively important that is. And your business sounds like in consulting, you help really with feasibility studies, design and architect geothermal solutions to do that. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that's what we did as we consulted. We stayed on the heating and cooling side until about 2017 or 2018. And we began to really catapult. And we noticed this little bit of a disconnect between the heating and cooling geothermal industry and the deep hot rock geothermal industry. We attended our first Geothermal Rising, or GRC, conference in San Diego in about 2011, but it was very academic, and the geothermal heating and cooling industry seemed to be more trades, right? They had, sure, we have plenty of PEs, but we didn't have the scientists. So we immediately said, nobody's bridging this gap, not even in the .orgs. So I facilitated along with Geothermal Rising GRC. I started, reaching out in the last 5 years, and it was a wonderful embrace. We've seen the industries begin to merge. At EggGeo, we began to hire academics, PhDs, geothermal scientists, and wow, that was if I knew what it would do for our business then, what it's done now, we are one of the few companies that really bridge that gap effectively. There are a growing number of us out there, but that's what people want. They don't want to know, okay, you can heat and cool my home, but where am I getting my electricity? They want a company that sees the earth. They want an organization. They want organizations that see the earth as the solution, whether you're flipping on a light switch, taking a shower, heating or cooling or whatever. It touches every part of our life. And that's what they want to see. They want somebody to say, oh, I only do the heating and cooling. If you want that part, you got to talk to these guys. And that's what we're in the process. That's what we're doing right now. We're unifying the industry.
I think that's so important. And that's been my experience in my short career in the geothermal, is there is still a kind of a chasm between the two. Understanding how you bridge that gap, I think, is going to be very valuable and absolutely sets your firm apart from others. One of the questions that I get often is the difference between nuclear and geothermal. And one thing I have to note, and I've shared with some of our viewers before, is no one has yet successfully tapped the 400-degree temperatures. I mean, maybe Iceland, barely, they have a lot of problems, but it's a very nascent technology. There's a lot of growth and advancement that has to happen. But in your perspective, having worked with both nuclear and geothermal, what are the pros and cons and I mean, this could take an hour to respond to that, but high level, how do you see the pros and cons between the two?
I'm going to try to not get in the weeds because I have a very high level view of it. If you look at uranium on one side in a reactor, and you look at that 400C on the other side, they do exactly the same thing. They turn water to steam and it drives turbines. The uranium's a beautiful thing because it has very little waste and no emissions, right? But it's radioactive waste. We still have a problem with that. We don't know exactly what to do with it. It's a very small problem because it's actually about 3 pellets the size of a thumb for one human being per year. So that's very little radioactive waste. And you can see how I favor it because I understand from the US technological standpoint, nuclear reactors are as safe as flying. It literally, do you worry about crashing every time you get on an airplane? It's just not reasonable. Yeah, sure, they crash sometimes. So on the geothermal side, all we're doing is, oh my gosh, it's like so obvious. It's like, yes, we can use uranium and use that, but it's right there a few kilometers down. Why do we even need to mine uranium if we can access that? And you know what? All that we need to access it is to want to do it. And I shared an analogy with you, which I won't broach now. If the US decides they want to do something, they do it, whether it's going to the moon or running oil pipelines across the entire United States in under a year.
Yeah, it's I agree with that. And I think both can be clean sources of energy, nuclear and geothermal. And I think people still are unsure of the side effects of geothermal drilling. To many that are uneducated, it looks like traditional oil and gas drilling, which 80% of that drilling is traditional oil and gas. And people are afraid of the results of fracking and mini earthquakes. So there's still a major education curve, I think, that has to happen to help people understand that geothermal is a clean and sustainable energy source. What people see is an oil derrick, right, or an oil drill rig. Yeah. So there's some negative sentiment there, but one of the things that I get asked, and you have this experience as you're designing your clients' solutions and you're implementing their geothermal projects, what are typically the biggest hurdles that you have to overcome really for a successful implementation?
Very good. I'm glad you asked that because this is really important. Most of our clients, to give you an idea of what we're talking about, and I think this is what you're talking about, are cities, city councils, major corporations. But we're getting more and more into where we're dealing with city councils that are funding district energy projects for their city, and we're pulling in. And the one of the first things they want a city council will want to come in and say, can you tell us how much it will cost? Well, no, we can't. We the first thing you have to do is apply a scoping study. We have to understand the city. What's the age of your existing water mains and sewer mains? What is the what are the geothermal resources nearby? And so a scoping study is first, and there are federal funds for these studies, as well as the feasibility studies for getting down to deep, hot rock. There's a lot of money in the IRA for that right now. And if you couple that with the distribution of that thermal energy to the city, there are huge programs with the federal government called community geothermal heat pump systems that are ripe for funding these novel ideas. And when I say novel, the novel part means they know that, oh, I'm going to throw a number out, 40 or 50% of our built environment needs new water or sewer lines, for example, right? We've heard all the stories. When we're tearing up the streets, my goodness, we're wasting valuable resources if we're not putting in the distribution infrastructure for thermal energy networks. Because we put those thermal energy, as we do the studies and the actually start designing the projects, these geothermal energy sources that can provide electricity and thermal energy for cities. As we design these projects, we don't want to just tear the street up once for distribution. We want to get the whole thing done. And that's the beauty of it. And that's what the city management is starting to see. This can work hand in hand with infrastructure upgrades that are being covered by the IRA anyway.
I think that's important. I heard you touch on two things that are, I think, critical. One, your studies provide the education to the city council or to the stakeholders, because I think people have some grand idea of, oh, we'll just use the earth to heat. I mean, so your studies have to really provide that education, and financials, right? So if a city or a government entity is the one trying to implement this, it can get complicated. Where are the funds? You said grants. There's other funds set aside. Is it bonds? So we realize that it is a large scale project oftentimes, and it can be pretty expensive. But I heard also the other thing you said on the distribution side. It's important to hear that you can potentially use existing infrastructure to leverage geothermal. It sounds like if you can't, it's because there's old main lines, not necessarily you have to put new technology in the ground, right? So in terms of distribution of this energy source, how do you see the pros or cons of leveraging existing infrastructure for distribution?
That is a great question. And that is part of what a lot of the federal and state funds are going for right now on community thermal energy networks. For example, one of the first questions somebody that has a little time like yourself to study this might ask is, okay, New York City has old steam mains. Can they be repurposed for distribution of thermal energy? Well, sure. But that requires a little bit more study to see, what the sizing is compared. Same with natural gas pipelines. Low pressure natural gas distribution lines in streets can be that space in the street can be either repurposed for thermal energy networks, which we're doing in several locations right now, where they're actually taking out the natural gas pipelines and replacing them with thermal energy networks. Because guess what? They're no longer using furnaces and gas hot water tanks in their homes. They're using heat pumps and heat pump water heaters in their homes. Everything's electrified. That's the decarbonization. Now, I'm not so drastic as to say we won't need natural gas. It's just, Do you, I have a question for you. I'm kind of putting a pin in it right here, Andrew.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful if I shared a screenshot of what a thermal energy network looks like in a kind of a cartoonish form?
Sure, that'd be great.
Would that, I think it might help.
Yeah.
If you'll allow screen sharing, I'll jump right on that and kind of explain it a little further. And it looks like you did good. And we're going to go to advanced and share a part of the screen and really appreciate. So this is something we did for New York. This is a law, the Thermal Energy Networks and Jobs Act, passed on July 5th, 2022 with the governor's signature. And what this shows is exactly what we're doing. We have exchange facilities that may have natural gas CHP facilities in there creating electricity. It may be receiving the waste energy from the geothermal EGS system. These are the exchange facilities that take and accept and reject heat from your city infrastructure. And this pipe running around through the city, which represents only one of three major pipelines that need to run through each city, is the thermal energy network pipeline. Think of it as a water pipe. It's about the size of a water main that supplies your fire hydrants and your drinking water, except it just accepts waste energy from your commercial applications, your residential applications, and your pools and whatever else needs it, absorb it. We're also tapping into wastewater from wastewater, the waste from your buildings, and which is always 65 to 75 degrees. And we're tapping into dewatering operations, whether they're from subways or basements or whatever. And we're using surface water and geothermal resources. And I'll stop sharing with that so we can see each other again, to be a shock absorber to get rid of extra energy when we need to, and provide extra energy when we need it. So what we have is something where we have three main lines that need to be, besides electricity, we need a water main, we need a sewer main, and we need a thermal energy main. That essentially eliminates the need, most situations, for a natural gas pipeline. So we're essentially using the same number of pipelines, we're just replacing the natural gas pipeline.
I think that's that. First of all, that image was helpful for me and for our audience to see. So thanks for sharing that. So if it sounds like some or a majority of the existing infrastructure could be used, depending on how old the infrastructure is, which is very helpful in terms of the financial investment. What other hurdles, when it comes to geothermal as a whole, what other hurdles does the industry face, and what do we have to do to overcome them to really make this a wide adopted, source of our energy consumption and production?
You covered something very well or briefly before that I want to reiterate, and then I'll talk about the hurdle. One of the first one is the hurdle. When we get with the city councils and public forums, they are so valuable that you can't be overstated how important it is to do the public forums at the public libraries, the Moose Lodge, whatever, as well, after you get the city council on your side. And in our experience in the last 33 years, every time we get in front of a city council or something, they get it. After they spend an hour listening to a presentation, sort of like what we're doing in our conversation, they get it. So once you get that, and you educate the public, do a public education campaign, a few of these public forums, then you have that. Then the big question becomes, how are we going to fund this $100 million project or whatever it ends up being? That's where companies that have funds come in and say, we are here to take the burden out of this, because it's an investment, much like any electric utility or water utility, that they see a constant, very low yield return for a long time. I mean, forever, essentially. So these ESCOs, energy service companies, these baseload type companies that come in and fund these, become a very important part of it. Sure, the local communities can buy bonds, But a lot of times an ESCO can come in and make it a lot more painless than buying a bond or something like that, because an ESCO is going to guarantee that the investment produces the energy promised.
That makes sense. And I feel that what you're proposing or what you have done in these exchanges really touches on my why as to why I founded Deep Power, which is to be able to provide energy independence throughout the world, where if you use your infrastructure you face, whether it's a city or your own home, we really have a potential to reduce our dependency on foreign governments or tyrants or large corporations who could, increase power, cut it off. And I think we've become so familiar with that dependency that my passion as to why I'm doing this is to really, find a solution to provide that independence throughout the world. And so that's what drives me every day. And I could tell from your background, just with trying to solve your own simple problem of your air conditioner, that's kind of driven a lot of your work. And so I appreciate you sharing your passion. It is clear that it is a remarkable opportunity for us if we can educate, and I can see it requires a private-public partnership, because to truly adopt this at a fast pace in a large scale, no private entity can do it without the support of government, whether that's, it's going to be permits to drill or to dig or, grants. So really working together, I think we can solve a lot of these hurdles quickly. That's my perspective. It might take 5, 10, 15 years, but I think it's essential we try.
I love what you said about the permits, because you touched on something that will lengthen our interview by just a minute. One of the reasons we're so valuable is that we do serve on the code committees that write the codes for permits. Another thing we're doing, and we're finding very successful, is that you alluded to it. There are silos between the authorities having jurisdiction in cities, whether you're dealing with the water department, the sewer department, the electric company. And we almost need, and this is what we're able to do, we almost need a task force that can break down those silos and say, okay, enough of being safe and staying in your silo. We need to work together. We're using energy from drinking water, from wastewater, from dewatering operations, from the local geothermal. And I love what you said about energy independence. Every single community becomes an independent energy user. And you don't pipe any, if you do this right, you don't have to pipe in even the electrical, the gas, any of that. It all becomes part of the community, which is what Mother Earth gave us. She's just begging us to use her resources properly.
Well, Jay, I appreciate your time and all that you do. I know you're a prolific speaker and writer, and so for any in our audience that are considering larger scale geothermal projects, EggGeo and Jay are the people to go to. They've done a lot of work. They've implemented a lot of projects, and so I'd invite our audience to go study your website and some of your social media to learn more about you. But I want to thank you for your time. I know you have grandkids in the house, and I don't want to keep you from them. So appreciate your time and hope you stay safe over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Andrew. You have been an absolute pleasure to have an interview with, and I can't wait to work with you more as you develop your wonderful vision for our industry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a great one.